Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're happy to be having this conversation with you today. I'll kick off. My name is Shruti Sehra. I'm a managing partner at New Profit. We are both a funder and a supporter, a capacity building supporter of nonprofit organizations. And I have the pleasure of working actually in intimate ways with this entire crew of people. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. But let me just introduce the topic. So what we're here to discuss today is mergers and acquisitions in the nonprofit sector, as well as strategic collaborations. And the reason we're talking about this is that we're in a really interesting moment in our sector. Now, my guess is a lot of conversations have started in some version of that kind of way. We're in a really interesting moment in our sector. But let me share why I think that's true in this context. So as we know, the education nonprofit sector, it's a pretty mature sector. And we're also experiencing a lot of change right now. So with the Department of Education shutting down, 7 different agencies that state leaders are starting to work with, it is becoming harder and harder. The degrees of difficulty have risen so high for state leaders and district leaders to navigate the environment. In the midst of that, we also have much more mature nonprofit organizations in the space who are thinking differently and are able to think differently and ready to act in ways that might have been unusual or unheard of maybe 10 years ago. And it's actually creating this necessity and the conditions to enable organizations to start collaborating more and thinking about how they can merge to create more coherence within their own organization rather than trying to force district and state leaders to figure out how do they put together a mix of different organizations and try to get them all working together in alignment across what they're trying to do. So it is an interesting time, and merging is not for the faint of heart. We were literally having a conversation saying, are there other sessions on mergers and acquisitions? And we weren't sure. And yeah, I'm looking at you all saying no. And we thought it might be because some of the other sessions that they were trying to create, they were trying to merge with ours, but that failed.
Yes!
You can tell we like each other a little too much. With that all being said, we're here today to talk a little bit more about this. I'll take a moment to turn to my panelists to introduce themselves, but just know that this is a group of extraordinary people that really believes in this work, and we're trying to figure out how to support it, enact it, manifest it in ways that are powerful for the field and help us move forward as a whole. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it to my panelists. If you can introduce yourself. Names, I should have said pronouns, she, her, organization, your role, and maybe do a little bit of like, what's your experience with nonprofit mergers to start?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joanna Burleson, and I am the practice leader of the Monitor Institute by Deloitte. I use she, her pronouns. My experience and interest is connected to the work that I do with nonprofit leaders as well as funders. We have, for a number of years, done work in the M&A space, and really in collaboration with Deloitte's M&A practice, but really taken that and placed it in the context of the social sector. And as Shruti, you alluded to, the past year and a half or so, we've not only seen the nature of the conversation and the activity start to shift, we've also taken a deliberate moment to say, what can we do as a firm to be really intentional and support the field? And so I've been a part of our nonprofit M&A practice at Deloitte for a number of years, and taking this moment to not only share what we're learning with our clients, but also do more work, right, to support the sector in this moment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Frances Messano. I'm CEO of NewSchools Venture Fund, she, her pronouns. And what brings me to this work, I'll just start off with a little bit about what NewSchools is about. We're a venture philanthropy, which means we raise money and we grant money out to early stage education innovators. folks who are starting new schools, both district and charter, launching new learning solutions, or folks who have ideas for reimagining the teaching profession. Every year, we're funding about 80 to 100 early stage organizations. We're actively providing support up to about 200. And so as you can imagine, as we're doing the work of supporting early stage builders, as we're engaging with folks who have been a part of our network, we're getting close to 1,000 folks funded over our 25-year history, we're constantly hearing questions and constantly receiving inbound requests on this topic of strategic collaborations. And so particularly, as you were mentioning, Shruti, the current environment where so much is changing technologically, politically, and financially, folks are like, we just need more help in exploring a range of our strategic options and are not sure where to start, what to do. And so that's led us to have to focus a lot more deeply on this question, right? And for us, we think about M&A as one lever on a continuum of options, but to really think about if we're an organization that is providing deep support to early stage builders, like this has to be a key part of that. And so I can share a little bit more about some of the work that we're doing and how we're thinking about it.
Good morning, everybody. There we go. So Sehra Johnson, a proud former teacher. And first, I just want to congratulate Shruti for landing that dorky dad joke.
Or mom joke.
or mom joke, sorry. We talked about this before, and I was like, I don't know if it's going to work, but it did. And that's why I love working with Shruti, who's an amazing board member for us, and I love working with the amazing ladies that are on this stage. So I'm here because I'm currently leading a merger between the Relay Graduate School of Education and an organization called Teaching Lab. We are bringing together one of the few organizations in education that can now do teacher preparation, teacher coaching, and amazing leadership development, and we're currently serving thousands of teachers and over 1 million students nationwide, and we are super excited to talk about our experience to date and also what we see on the horizon.
Great, thank you all. And I don't know if I landed the joke or not, but I appreciate the kindness of this room. So what we wanted to talk to you about today is a few different things. We want to talk about the decision-making process that goes into deciding whether or not to pursue a merger, acquisition, or strategic collaboration. The leadership dynamics involved in successful implementation of that, and then the role that philanthropy plays, ideally philanthropy plays in this process. That being said, we imagine that there might be some other questions from this room. So we do have a Slido. Go to slido.com. There's a number up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Feel free to type in questions as you have them. You don't have to wait till the end. I'll be kind of monitoring the Slido to make sure we're integrating your questions as we go through. Okay, that said, let's dive in. So I'd love to start with the first question around the decision making. So what do you think are the key factors that should go into the decision of whether or not to pursue a merger or acquisition? And how do you think about weighting these factors against each other? Maybe Joanna, you can start.
Sure, I'll start, and I'll first just observe the level of optimism I'm feeling on this stage. So it's nice to even enter this conversation not from a place of M&A or strategic collaborations as a place to go to because of distress or a sense of no other option or path. And I do think that's a myth, but what we're seeing in this moment, that might be true in some cases, and in terms of what you're weighing and the decision to even start to talk about not only M&A, but also the range of strategic collaborations, is the fact that it can also be a tool for incredible extension of your impact. So we often think about the decision in a couple of different categories. One is deepening your impact or growing in whatever way that makes sense for the organization, or the opportunity to build long-term sustainability and durability for the organization. And both of those things might be considerations for the organization. I think historically we've seen a narrative, particularly in the social sector, which is different from the commercial sector, which is it is the path of last resort. It represents closure and failure. And that's a myth I really want to break. And in this moment, what I'm really excited about is the fact that, especially the past year where there's been such an acceleration in volatility in our ecosystem, what we're hearing, we did a survey this past summer of 100 nonprofits, and one of the things we asked them on this topic is, what is the driver for your decision to even explore strategic collaborations? And the number one was not financial distress or sustainability. It was deepening impact. And that is a signal, right? That we're already changing the narrative about this as an incredible tool for deepening our impact and collaboration in different ways. So that's what's top of mind for me right now. And then we can speak to how you think about, M&A strategy, how you do this in an intentional way versus being opportunistic. But I think it's simply shifting the narrative as a whole around how to think about M&A is something that could be a real asset and a tool strategically versus a path of last resort.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
There's a term I've learned from Deloitte, strategically opportunistic.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, and both of those things, exactly. Because I can sit here and say, well, of course you want to first develop your full M&A strategy, and that needs to hang onto the organizational strategy, and you go through these beautiful steps that lead you to this incredible insight and the partner. The reality is there is an incredible amount of opportunism. You have a relationship with another organization and another leader. There might be a transition or a succession in the midst, and that's often where the spark happens, and you can pair that with the deliberate and thoughtful ways to approach making the decision, recognizing there's going to be opportunistic situation going on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Sehra, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm super excited to go next. And I just want to emphasize how rare it is to hear a consultant say that we don't need to have like an 80-page strategic planning deck.
They'll probably still give it to you.
Yeah, they probably.
I was like, we're working with Deloitte right now. They'll give you the deck. You'll get the deck. Yeah.
Okay, so I probably am one of the most, I would say, strategically opportunistic with like a capital O leaders. I really don't like 5-year strategic plans. I don't like 80-page slide decks. I think especially during this time period, if you create a 5-year strategic plan, we live in such a dynamic context, like it is going to be totally out of date, maybe even within 6 months. So to build on what Joanna said, the reason why I get up in the morning is because I radically believe that every single child in our nation can learn at the absolute highest levels. I believe every single student can learn to read. I think they can learn to do math at the highest levels. I think they all deserve to graduate high school or school systems in whatever form they are, ready to pursue their dreams. And that's what motivates me. And that is what motivated our decision to engage in some first, sort of merger diligence. And so let me give you a concrete example. Teaching Lab was working in New York City. We're one of the biggest and highest impact providers of curriculum-based teacher coaching. And then you get in there, you form really strong relationships, you start having an impact, and they start asking you to do other things, right? So they started asking us to do more leadership development. But we're kind of teacher people and a lot of former teachers. So we try to upskill people to do the leadership development. We try to recruit more people, but this takes a lot of time. Simultaneously, we could see in New York City that there was a stronger need for a science of reading teacher prep, right? And this was happening in all of the about 50 places that Teaching Lab was working in at that time. So when I looked up and thought about, do I need to, raise a bunch of money, hire a lot more people, tap into totally different talent pools and programs, or partner, that's what we were thinking about. So when the opportunity came to think about a complementary partner, Relay, the Relay Graduate School of Education, just made a lot of sense. So if you don't know Relay, they are an institute of higher ed that was founded about 20 years ago, and their goal was to reimagine teacher prep and become one of the highest impact teacher prep programs in the nation. They're also a national teacher prep program, which is exceedingly rare. They also have a leadership development division with extremely well-branded, extremely talented people leading that work. And so when you think about my concrete example, and I go out there and I'm trying to look for complementary organizations, you can see that that could be a match made in heaven. And so Transparently, we explored some other mergers, and then very transparently, we had some really great consultants that were used to the private sector, and when we were engaged in that merger process, or sort of the merger diligence before we made any decisions, they came with 80-page slide decks, and they started being very sort of legal right from the get-go. The focus was not on impact, mission, vision, complementary assets, how we could work in a complementary way, and that is how we launched this process with our board. And I won't tell that whole story now, but I think I will a little bit later about how we did that and how we did it without consultants at the beginning, and then brought them in like a little bit later. They're still useful. Yeah.
I feel the tension sitting between the two of us.
Yeah. We've worked together.
Well, I'll jump in. What I'll add is that, you know, our friends here have covered much of what I would share on this topic of how to evaluate M&A, but I do want to talk a little bit more about the range of partnership options and the range of collaborations. For me, and you're going to probably hear us continue to say this is a moment where leaders need to be thinking boldly about their plans for impact. What I can tell you, we're doing this ourselves at New School, is the way you've been going about your work so far is not necessarily the way it needs to look like in this next cycle. Given the political, the technological, and the financial pressures right now, right, we're gonna have to be bold in how we operate. What's our business model? What's our strategy? How do we move flexibly in this moment? How do we engage with opportunities that come? Like, that's something for us too, like, oh, will you do this? Have you thought about this? Blah, blah, blah. Nothing is static, right? And so I think the first invitation I have to everyone here is to say, as leaders, how are we moving strategically, nimbly, and adapt, and with I guess, what's the word? With adaptability, thank you. And within that context, right, you might be thinking about M&A. Okay, very few organizations are probably actually gonna go all the way through to having an M&A transaction. A handful will. A lot of people who explore M&A and go through the diligence process come at the other end and decide maybe this is not the right fit, and that's a great outcome too. But what you might do instead is consider, okay, if I need a different way of delivering on the bold impact that I want to have, maybe I should be partnering with an organization to acquire access to talent, to new capabilities, to have a more comprehensive go-to-market strategy, a more comprehensive product or solution right now. We're seeing a lot of that in our portfolio, especially in our learning solutions portfolio, where you're like, what's the best way to break through? New kinds of partnerships, new kinds of ways of engaging with clients. You might be thinking about joint ventures, which is another form of partnership. You might be thinking about shared back office. There might be ways to more efficiently staff yourself where maybe you can share a finance director or a communications director, especially if you're smaller, right? And so like, I think there's a whole range of options that we could be thinking about in terms of collaboration and partnership to get us to this broader outcome of how do we move both effectively, efficiently, and with greater impact so that the young people and the educators we serve can really benefit from what we're doing. And so like for me, like my main message is explore and be open to the exploration. The other thing I'll say here too is I think a lot of times when we talk about M&A, we have a very like clinical conversation about it. We won't have that here, but it's very technical. And then the first step you do is you have diligence, and then the next step and the next step, right? I think in the social sector, and I know you'll have a lot to say about this too, we come to this work from a very different place. We come to this work from a heart place, from a mission place, right? Folks here, we all had opportunities to work in many other sectors to do other things, but we do this because this is purpose work. And so I think we also need to normalize the fact that as we explore partnerships of whatever kind, including M&A, for many folks, you might be experiencing grief or loss. You might be having a failure narrative that's running through your head that maybe you did something wrong. And I just want to double click on what you said, Joanna, like this is a natural part of any organization exploring what's next. But we also, I think in the field, as we have these dialogues, need to understand that leaders might be going through a process. So how do we make that process okay? How do we normalize it? How do we create the safe space for exploration and discussion? And then how do we make sure that we're resourcing people to have both the money and the technical know-how to understand how do you get started and where do you go next? And so that's something I'm sitting with a lot, particularly given that we support founders who, you know, pour years, sometimes decades into their idea to even think about a different way of what's next can be really hard.
Yeah, I can pick up on that because M&A for a really long time has been the domain of the private sector and something to potentially aspire to because there is a profit motive and success in acquisition. And so much of the resources to steward the technical aspects of this are designed around that narrative and how do we make it happen and how do we do the diligence and how do we make sure that the deal is closed and we've got efficiency on the other end. And so much of what I have learned over the past few years is we do need to just acknowledge the deeply personal impact that, in particular M&A, but any kind of strategic collaboration and partnership is going to have, and not only for the leader, for board members, for the staff of the organization. And so starting with that, coming back to what is the mission here, what is the nature of the problem that might have shifted around us, and how is this moving maybe the sector and the big us to solving that is the right place to start, because if you can be mission focused and vision focused, that makes it much more effective than going to the technical consultant to help us find a partner to close shop.
Great. Okay, so let's dive into the leadership dynamics. Okay. Sehra, given that you're living this right now, would love to hear you continue to build on some of your lessons learned, and specifically on the leadership dynamics and what you're learning about navigating that in this moment.
Yep. Great. Who here has fallen in love before? Okay, and so I know some people probably do it like this, but probably you didn't have a diligence checklist before you fell in love. So
we have some parameters.
Parameters, right? No, that's fine. Maybe Francis has a diligence checklist. And respect. Okay, so
parameters.
Yeah, good. But really, like, there's a reason why it's like falling in love, right? It's a lot about vibes, and it's about trust. And are you going to take a sort of like leap of faith to go all in with somebody, et cetera? And I think that particularly in the social justice-driven educational sector, we need an entirely new playbook for how we think about partnerships, mergers, acquisitions, and that's why I really appreciate this group of people who are working on that. And so again, when we were exploring some other mergers and working with some consultants who were wonderful, but again, very much informed by the private sector, they would bring to some of our board members things like term sheets, okay? Even the most business-minded people on our boards are on the boards because they care about the mission and the impact that we could have. That's why they decide to be on a nonprofit educational board. They're not there to make a profit, okay? And everybody that works for us on in both of these organizations, like when you look at the surveys, it's always like 95% of people, they are there for the mission. So I think that needs to be really fundamental to how we think about even these like very early conversations about partnerships, merging, et cetera. So in this process, between Relay and Teaching Lab, the first thing we did is we brought the boards together to talk about that. No term sheets, no like 80 slide deck analysis, just let's look at the two missions of the organizations, let's look at their current impact, and really importantly, let's look at their complementary assets. And then we just asked a very simple question, which is, do we think we can have a bigger impact and a bigger impact at scale, and can we do this better and faster together than we would apart? It's a very simple question. And probably, I'm sure you can tell me, she was there, probably for like the first 2 to 3 board meetings and conversations we had, that's all we talked about. All right. Now, at this phase, we decided that there were a set of questions that the board members wanted to answer, and we created what we called a no, go, no, sorry.
Go, no,
go.
Go.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks, Shruti. Yes, good. Well, I created this slide deck, and somebody else, like a comms consultant, told me it was really goofy, but it worked. So go, no-go slide deck. And we just had a set of questions from the boards that we decided to answer. And this is what people would usually call the diligence questions. And we said that if we could answer these questions effectively, then we would move forward together. Okay. okay? I think this is usually where people would bring in consultants as well, but here's what I did. I got one member of Teaching Labs board, that was Shruti, and one member of Relays board, and I sort of like locked you guys in a WeWork with me, maybe for 4 hours, and we went through all of the documents, all of the materials, and I said, I'm gonna act like a management consultant, and I'm gonna write down every single thing that you said. So we created that slide deck and then talked to the boards, and we went through all of the questions, and we realized that we were super complementary in many different ways, even including things like where we're located in the country. Also, we looked at things like who are our top largest funders, because one thing you don't want to do is cannibalize the funding that you're getting when you come together, which is a real risk. And then we talked about those things, and then the board voted to move forward. But again, like, there was not a term sheet right away. It was all about vision, mission, complementary assets. And then when all of that legal stuff had to happen, it really fell into place very, very quickly.
Great. And I love, one of the things I love about what you're saying is that I'm hearing a theme about culture and the importance of culture as well. I mean, we oftentimes talk about how culture eats strategy for breakfast. This is a perfect example of that playing out. Okay, Joanna, Francis.
Okay.
My question for you is, you guys are sitting at this from an intermediary and a consultant aspect, and you're engaging with philanthropy through this process. So what do you see as the role of philanthropy through this? And there was a question about how do you even get funding for this? Like, how does this work? And what would be the ideal role in the ways in which philanthropy can be most supportive in this moment?
I'll start. Money is the number one. I mentioned the survey. It's a good role for philanthropy, right? But what I mean by that, and I'll go into what sits underneath that. The survey told us, when we asked these organizations who are all interested in this exploration, said, what do you need from funders? In some ways, I'm speaking to funders here because I think many of you in the room, this will resonate. It is number one, so what do you need to move from funders? Number one, we need full stop financial resources to support the time and essentially, and potentially like the hard dollars that are needed to move into this process. But also, as you think about what are the big asks and where do you actually need to lean in? Sehra, I appreciate you naming that you don't always need to start with you don't need to invest in hiring someone, but it certainly takes time, right? And I think that's really important. And there are two pieces of this. There is, and what we've heard is, there is the time, resources, and energy where you also might need to engage some support in this on the exploration. Can be coded as due diligence, but it's a slightly different thing because the time that you needed to take to dig into building not only a shared vision, exploring strategy, and building that trust, that's part of this process. And it does take time and it takes resources. So first there is that exploration, that's number one. And organizations need the time and the resources to do that. The second piece, which we don't talk about enough, and I'm very curious to get your take on this as well, is once it happens, and the most important thing is when you move from we are now a new organization to how are we, let's call this in the sector, post-merger integration. That's where the real work is. So it's not simply we've got the right match, we know how it's going to play out, but there is real tangible work. Think about integrating your back office systems, taking those two HR handbooks and creating them into one. That is intensive, and nonprofits don't have the extra resources to staff and do all of that work. And it's really, really important because otherwise that slides and that integration period can last 2 years or a lot of it never happens. So those two pieces, if you're having conversations with funders, and funders if you're out there, they're equally important. They're equally important and need to be resourced.
Yeah, I can jump in and add a couple things. Funders have a huge role to play in all of this work, and that role needs to be handled with care because of the power dynamics that are at play. I think as funders, you're going to see an entire sector, right? Whether it's the field of K-12 education or verticals within it, slices within it. And so you're going to have a field level view. That is really important information, right? Like you're going to be able to say like, oh, I'm seeing organization A doing X, Y, Z over here. Whoa, if they partner with organization B, there could be possibility and potential. That's helpful information. Oh, you're talking about you want to grow in this way? Oh, this other organization has these great capabilities. There's like matchmaking that's possible. But the thing is that you can't do it in a way where you're saying, hey, org A, you must merge with org B. That we can't do. But I think there's a way in which you open up a conversation that supports exploration that helps leaders to make connections, to expand their possibilities. But that has to be done without pressure for a certain deal or a certain outcome to come out the other end. In addition, with funding the exploration, yes, there's real dollars that are needed. Whether you're deciding to hire a consultant upfront or not, it takes CEO time, it takes deep board time, and what that means is that CEO, that ED cannot spend time on other things. So you may not hire a consultant to run your diligence process, but maybe you need someone to do your, I don't know, your other strategy work internally, maybe some of the other projects you had. There's still a need for resource somewhere because there's not just additional time that's going to manifest, kind of out of the blue. And so I think that is something that's really important. But I just want a key message here, I'm just going to keep saying it, is the exploration, the consideration of a collaboration must be driven by the nonprofit leader themselves. It cannot be driven by funders. And I do think funders know this. In all the conversations that I'm having with our funders, with other funders in the space, there's a deep understanding of that, but there's also a hesitancy. Because folks are like, okay, I'm not trying to put my, my thumb on the scale, but I'm nervous if I share this information, how's that going to be perceived? And so there's also a little bit of paralysis. And so like my whole thing to funders is like, it's okay, don't be paralyzed. Share the information, but really think about how you're doing that given the dynamics in place. I'm just going to second what you said, Joanna, about funding the full journey. This work takes significant time, and once the quote-unquote collaboration or the deal is done, it's going to take, especially for M&A, an additional up to 2 years, maybe more, for true integration of programmatic solutions, of really creating something coherent, really creating a coherent culture. And that needs to be resourced over time. And the combined entity should maintain funding at the level the two separate organizations had in the past. I think a thing here is sometimes organizations wind up getting penalized for merging because they don't get the same level of resources maybe the two separate organizations had. It's like, oh great, now I only get to fund one. We need to rethink that math. Right? I know the young people say the math's not mathing. Fine, math's not mathing, right? And so how do we really think about making sure that we're resourcing organizations for the kind of success that we got really excited about throughout the process? And I think that's really key. The last thing is, I think there's a real role that we can play as well in helping the field to learn on this topic. We've talked a lot about normalizing the exploration, celebrating exploration, celebrating when a deal doesn't get done, and just to say, like, how do we make this something that's more discussable, more celebrated, and we make this part of our process? And there's ways in which we can be creating tools, playbooks, to really help folks understand what to do next. So with that in mind, my friend, if you don't mind advancing to the next slide for a moment, I just want to share these just couple things for you to take as resources with you. The first one is just a scan of some of the resources that I've seen on some of the M&A playbooks, like Deloitte did this work with America's Promise Alliance is in there, and I would highlight that as something to take a look at. Other articles that we've been looking at. For folks who are thinking about funding, Sea Change Capital Partners as well as Lodestar, they provide grants for exploration. You should absolutely look at those funding opportunities and consider whether or not that might be a fit for you all. So there's just links to different organizations that are focused on that if you're thinking about this work, hopefully you'll find it helpful. The second QR code we at NewSchools right now are really thinking about the role that we should be playing to support organizations in this moment in time. And so we are partnering with Deloitte and have a survey out to understand what K-12 organizations are thinking about in terms of strategic collaborations. What have you done so far? And what are you hoping to do, so we can see what opportunities we might have to help seed more of this work moving forward. And we're going to have 2 field-wide webinars that are open to all on kind of the 101 and 201 of how you even get going on this process, things to think about, and our hope is to provide some guidance to the field.
Can I build on what Frances said? Okay, well, one, Frances just dropped a lot of wisdom. Okay, that was amazing. And in both, like for the funders in the room, I think that's a lot of wisdom. And then for anybody who is exploring partnerships or M&A in this type of way, I think one of the most important things that Frances just said is that if you, as the leader who is managing this process, do not have a really strong point of view, this is not going to work. Okay. And you need to know what you're trying to achieve, you need to know who you are, and I am not saying that people need to engage in this process in the exact same way as I am. I actually think this is why we need these playbooks. And I love what you said, Frances, where you were like, we also need to be able to talk about when deals don't work out. When I was starting this process, there were so many whisper conversations I had with people. People were like, did you hear about this deal that didn't happen? and those conversations were helpful because the main reasons were, 1, the boards or the leadership teams didn't get along, and 2, it was the culture of the organization. So even after they decided to come together, it just like really wasn't working out. So those were helpful conversations, but I don't know why we can't just have those out in the open and be like, yeah, we explored this deal, it didn't work out, here are the reasons why. And the more that we do that, the more we're going to learn as an educational ecosystem that's doing more of this type of M&A work. All right, but I don't want anybody here to leave thinking that I hate consultants or something. So let me just tell you when I brought them in. So. Yeah, good. So
it's feeling better in between the 2 of them. Yeah.
So after we decided to move forward, I said I definitely need a consultant to manage all of these operational processes. So all of the things that Joanna and Frances were talking about that like is really difficult work, like in all these operational decisions about HR, compensation, culture, and so I talked to many different individual consultants. And again, like now Deloitte is probably going to have a lot of these types of people that can do this and help people out. But I wanted to pick an individual who had experience in the educational sector. And if I was going to work with a firm, I wanted to pick the individual at that firm or know exactly who was going to work with us and what their level of experience and expertise was. So I found somebody who had done actually a bunch of mergers in the charter sector. And then he is still working with us, and he's amazing. If anybody wants his name or resume, I'll give it to you after this. But he helped us establish cross-organizational working groups and then gave them really simple guidance for how they would meet, talk together, and then start proposing decisions. And then he organizes a sort of steering committee across the 2 organizations that reviews those proposals. I think one unorthodox thing that we're doing is that we are taking a year to convene the people, mobilize the people, make sure we say the same key messages over and over and over again, and also so we can include the right people in the decision making, so that when we roll out a sort of totally unified organization, nobody is going to say things like, oh, I didn't see that coming, or I feel like this happened to me. And people are very sensitive to that, right? Like, especially in the social justice nonprofit sector. So you got to understand your people, and I'm thrilled that we're taking the time required to make this not just as effective as possible, but also something that just like feels really good for the most important part of our work, which is the people and the culture. We also have a culture consultant because that is also, as we said before, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that's some of the most intensive work that we're doing, is working with a culture consultant and leaders from both organizations to ensure that we're super clear about where the 2 organizations are now and where and sort of who we want to be when we grow up.
Okay. So I know we're nearing the end of our time. We're not getting to all of the questions, but several of them have been answered through the conversation. So I'll just turn it to each of you for what's one closing piece of advice that you have for organizations that are thinking about strategic collaborations, mergers, or acquisitions.
One piece of advice is to listen to and have conversations with other leaders like Sehra, who've been through the process, and not just successfully, but have done the exploration, because all of the wisdom and learning is sitting around us. So one piece of advice, and this will guide your decisions around, do we need a consultant or not? What kind of consultant? Who should I be talking to? Is learn from your peers and learn from other leaders, full stop.
I think for me, it's don't stand still and don't go alone. Don't go it alone. Like I said, it's a dynamic time. It is not the time to say we're just going to keep doing things the way we've always done it. And so don't stand still. Really consider what's next and how you need to evolve to have the impact that you seek to have. But don't do it alone. Talk to others. Find the technical experts that you need to support it. Find your peers. Learn out loud. Make it discussable. You're not doing this by yourself. Everybody is thinking about this in some way, shape, or form. So learn out loud. Engage.
My advice would be to dream bigger and trust yourself. I feel like at every point in my career where I've made a big decision, there may be like 80% of the people I talk to tell me not to do it, and I've never regretted any decision I've made like that. And again, I think it's partly because we live in such dynamic times. So even if you're going down some uncharted path, if you are very, very clear about the impact that you want to have in the world, and you have a strong theory of action and vision for how to achieve that, I just wouldn't let the haters hate. I would keep moving forward, trust yourself, and like Frances said, learn from other people along the way, but don't let them hold you back.
Yeah, and mine would be very similar to Frances. Just start having these conversations. I think that this time calls for a different way of working. I share that belief with you. And we have to think about working across groups. We have to think about working in a collaborative fashion in order to move this work forward. So this is the time, just go for it. That doesn't mean, start making an acquisition tomorrow. This is not some game of succession, but this is a time for us to really do things in a different way and figure out how do we serve the field more effectively. So with that, we'll close up. I think all of us can probably hang around a little bit. There were some specific questions I know for Sehra about Relay. I think there's specific questions about NewSchools, but you also already answered some of them, which was, will NewSchools actually fund us and support us in thinking about this? You announced it, QR codes on the screen. So that wasn't a yes, but it was a maybe.
I'm sure some people might come to talk to me after this. So I'm happy to have those conversations.
So we're around. We're happy to continue this conversation, but thank you all and enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you. Thank you.